Do you happen to have, sorry, do you happen to have a couple more copies of these? We just, not something that we've thought about in the last couple of weeks, so.
Which one is it?
This is the 4.1, 4.4, 4.5. You gave us these thinking that we may have TAs on them, and I recall that as well. I just want to make sure that I have a chance to check with our team when we take our caucus before we definitively do so.
Yeah, I did knock around a whole bunch of those. I got about 4 or 5 more. I'll give them to you. And these are the ones where we were very close, I think, last time.
Right.
So print them out in the hopes that maybe TAing, but they're good to go as far as we're concerned. So if you guys have no changes, we can sign off on these. If you do have changes, we can discuss them. Same ones I just gave you.
Appreciate it.
Also, I know Pam sent around the minutes from last time. I didn't have any changes. I don't know that we need to have approval of it, but if you guys had any changes, let us know. She'll make those changes so make sure they're accurate.
Yep, we'll do that.
All right, where do you want to start from there? You want to talk about any of these 3 now or no? The 4.4, 4.1, 4.5?
Well, I think we'll probably just take a look at these in caucus. I think we're pretty much in the same place on them. As I said, I just want to verify with the team before we definitively agree to it. We did also write our own version of the 30-day time frame for the dues deduction. My guess is it's probably 6 to 1, half a dozen the other, but we'll go ahead and give those to you just since we went to the trouble of making them. I think we both know what we're trying to do here, so we'll take a look at yours, and as long as the substance is the same, I don't anticipate any difficulty agreeing to it.
Okay, yeah, we'll look at yours in caucus too and see. Let me, since I'm passing a lot of paperwork out, let me pass out a few others that we have. So what we're passing out now, you see, is also articles that we've been discussing. It's 3.5, which is non-discrimination. 3.7, which is strikes and strike-related activity, and then 9.3, which is standard course syllabus, which we have, and I'll just briefly address what we've added. Okay, so looking at 3.5, along the lines of what we discussed last time, in section 2, we still have the issue with the political statements and activities. And frankly, I don't think that's something we're going to agree to as a compromise. We've left in political affiliation. Credit history, we don't think is really applicable, but we can accept it. The section 3 is trying to wordsmith what we've been kicking back and forth with regard to making sure that if bargaining unit members file agreements, can also pursue court action and vice versa, but without extending it further than it need be. So that last sentence is the new part. So that's the proposal on 3.5.
We've actually got one as well that, at least on that section 3 part, looks basically the same. So I think we're probably good with that. On the statements and affiliation, use statements, whatever it is, we've kind of been kicking around on the political side. If you're prepared for it, it might be worthwhile to have a conversation about our academic freedom proposal. If we can agree, well, I'm not sure if we can agree, but if we're persuaded that what we're trying to accomplish with the statements and activities piece is essentially covered by academic freedom, then I think we can probably put this one to bed, but it's something we'll need to have a conversation about. So if you want to do that today, we can do it today. If you want to do it at a future session, we can do it at a future session, but I think that's probably going to be the way to get through this.
Okay, let's address it in caucus and see, because we haven't had that specific discussion yet. We'll pull up that proposal and see if it's something that we can work on today, or if we'll need to get back to you. 3.7 with the strike article. You can see the last, we just added the last sentence regarding our ability to go into court if need be to obtain relief under the statute.
So I have one sort of, I guess I would say hypothetical, but for the fact that it was an actual situation that I ran into once. So in a K-12 district once, as you probably know, there's statutory provisions that provide for payout of sick leave upon separation of employment. If you have so many years of service, there's statutory parameters on that. But it's permissive. So a lot of contracts have language implementing that statute. Well, this particular year, the employer decided it didn't want to keep that on its books anymore, so wanted to strike through that whole language. Okay, that's their proposal. And they indicated it was very important to them, even maybe willing to insist on this to the point of impasse. And, when we sent our bargaining update to our members, we said, look, this is a serious proposal from them. It seems to be something they really care about. So teachers started using sick leave rather than scheduling doctor's appointments during the summer and things like that. And we got accused of, convincing employees to do an authorized sick out, and that was a unauthorized strike activities, and they were going to go after us in court and all this kind of, it was all bluster. Nothing came of it, but I guess the point, I guess, is how broadly construed, like at what point is something an alleged violation of statutes versus, I guess a bargaining tactic. So like if something like that happened, do you perceive that as something that you would want to be going to the courts to get immediate relief from, or is it really what it's supposed to be, and it's if the union calls a strike or a work stoppage of some sort that's illegal like that? I guess I'm just interested in hearing your perspective on that kind of a situation.
It's a bit of a hypothetical. It's hard to answer without a specific set of circumstances. I can tell you, I don't think, based upon your description of the K-12 issue, we would pursue a lawsuit claiming a strike. In that circumstance, I don't think that fosters good relations probably for negotiations to start litigation. It does happen, of course. It's unfortunate. But the flip side of the coin to that is strikes. Fortunately, we don't see it in Florida very often, but strikes encompass more than just everybody walks out with a picket sign. There's a definition in the statute, and coordinated or concerted calling in sick, everybody calling in sick can be a strike. I've not come across that tactic in Florida personally, but you see it on the news occasionally with airlines and stuff. Famous for this kind of thing, and management, pilots and whatnot are always pushing the envelope, it seems like. Fortunately, in the private sector in Florida, we don't have that too much, so I'm pretty confident that I don't think we're ever gonna probably need to use this article. Imagine not from your side, no one's gonna wanna go on strike, and not from our side to enforce it. Having said that, it's in every union contract we've ever negotiated, but I don't think it's gonna be an issue, to be honest with you. I don't see us pushing the envelope. Part of that is because I don't see you guys pushing the envelope and trying to use something that looks like a strike as leverage, so.
Yeah, I guess as long as we're sort of in agreement that, you know, employees engaging in sort of rational, self-interested behavior, even if it's maybe not necessarily what the employer hoped for, but it's not like any sort of coordinated thing, and that's not a strike and isn't something that we're going to go get an injunction against. I don't think that's the only thing that occurred to me as a even potential issue with your proposal. So if that doesn't seem like the type of thing that would provoke use of this sort of relief, then I don't think there's really going to be a big issue, but we'll talk about it.
Yeah, and that's why I think this good compromise is to reference the statute and whatnot. The statute does have the definitions in there, and it's been interpreted, so this is not one of those areas where you see a lot of activity. I don't imagine it's going to be an issue.
And the court could say, no, this isn't strike activity.
Right.
You're not getting any relief.
Right. I can tell you in the few instances where my firm's been involved, I'm aware of strikes in the public sector or any activity, we've never had to really go in the last 20 years to court, but to the extent it's ever come up as a discussion, we look at that. Obviously, if you push the envelope with it, it has a pretty devastating effect on the parties trying to work together. So the employer is always cognizant of that. I'm sure the faculty in this situation would be as well. If you get to that point, you're at a whole different level. It's counterproductive. So the good news is hardly anybody ever gets to that point.
Okay, well, we'll talk about it.
We would use it as a bargaining strategy, yes, for sure. If we can't reach agreement, there's the impasse process, which is not great fun either, but it's more professional than these kinds of efforts. So that's strike-related activity, Article 3.7. Said if you guys are on board with our change there, we're prepared to sign off on that today. Have a discussion amongst yourselves and let us know. And the last one was, I handed you 9.3, right? Standard course syllabus.
Yep.
All right, so what we did, we heard you last time on standard course syllabus, and we've tried to put both interests here and together by including the timeline, the 2 weeks prior to the start of the term, but also including some flexibility for unforeseen circumstances, basically. And so this is what we've come up with here for you to take a look at or let us know on the standard course syllabus. And Dr. Giannetta, we were talking about standard course syllabus. Did you want to, I know we talked earlier, you might want to mention a few things on that.
Yes, did you already go over the?
I just advise them we're trying to compromise here. We put in the timeline, but also some flexibility for unforeseen circumstances.
Absolutely, and we included here a document relevant to an addendum. So clearly, sometimes things occur, statutory changes occur, a board rule changes, and it's after the beginning of the semester. So how do we navigate that with our faculty? As we've had in the past, we've asked faculty to share an addendum to the syllabus with the students after the fact. We think that's very reasonable. Again, I regret missing the last meeting because of my commissioner work at the Division of Workforce and Economic Development of the American Association of Community Colleges. I reviewed the video, and I know it appeared that there's a lot of discussion about the term reasonableness, and the predicate of the the argument and the discussion was focused on the fact that, or the allegation that the administration submits the master course standard syllabus the day before class to our faculty. And again, if we're going to be focused on having a collegial, good faith, collaborative discussion on negotiations, I would hope that we would expose truth and use truth as the foundation for these discussions and the debates. Indeed, it did happen, right? Years ago, under a previous administration, the development and the dissemination to the faculty of the standard course syllabus was delegated to the Dean of Arts and Sciences from the administration. And at one time, that dean sent to the entire college the standard course syllabus the day before classes. I was a provost at the time. I was not in this position. I was equally outraged for the faculty that I represented as a provost, both full-time and part-time, and called this dean and called the people who occupied my seat, my predecessors, as the vice president, expressing dismay, and that can't happen again. It was wrong. You're absolutely right to have been outraged. It was the wrong thing to do. But as of January of 2016, with a leadership transition, that ceased to occur. That never happened for the past 3.5 years. We have not sent the standard syllabus to our faculty the day before classes. I conducted an audit, emails with Dean Thorne, who's responsible for those changes. And at no time did we see, since that time, the sharing of the syllabus the day before classes. In fact, it was reasonably early, within months, and one iteration within 2 weeks because of a recent board rule to the grading. So we value and empathize with your frustrations, and that did happen once before. We acknowledge that, and it was the wrong thing to have happened. But due to the leadership transition, that change occurred drastically. The first syllabus, after I assumed the office of the Vice President of Academic Affairs and Faculty Development and College Provost, I personally sent out the first syllabus. And then after that, the role was for the Dean of Academic Affairs and Institutional Accreditation to do so. In fact, I met with the Faculty Senate when I came into this role. The Faculty Senate shared some reflections on concerns related to the syllabus. We incorporated those reflections in the syllabus, and we knew that what we were doing with our faculty was the right thing to do, good faith, with a sense of reasonableness. So we're fine with the 2 weeks. We think that's ample time, and we appreciate that and are comfortable with the change to that definition. But I just want to set the record clear, again, if the predicate was used, that it's a current day, a recency effect of the day before, it indeed is inconsiderate and just something that we are not doing and will not do to our faculty. So I would just appreciate clarifying and correcting that way.
Yeah, I don't recall a specific time when it was said that I remember discussion that it had happened. I don't remember anyone saying it was any particular person or any particular administration's fault or anything like that.
And not the person of the administration, but for the timeline about the day before. I think that was the very visceral predicate for the change. And
Right,
we
but yeah,
acknowledge it happened.
that wasn't necessarily, I don't think, directed at any particular person in the administration or like I said, any particular administration. It's just something that did happen that was very onerous to the faculty, and faculty have long memories of things like this. And so this was something that definitely wanted to make sure doesn't happen again. So I think, we're happy to see a willingness to commit to
Right,
that happening.
right. But I just hope, Graham, that if we invoke history, that recent history and current day activities are also appreciated in the discussion when we're having these dialogues. That's the reason for my surfacing this concern.
Okay, I understand. So I guess one thing that kind of occurs to me, so we've talked about there are sometimes things that happen that might prevent 2 weeks from being honored. for statute changes, what are the sorts of things in your opinion that would prevent it from being able to be done within that 2-week window?
Well, as was mentioned at the last meeting, the statutory changes that require us to address this with our students, and depending on when the statute, the final draft of the statute is released and we're notified, and we have to determine, is this something that warrants placement in the syllabus, or is it something that does not? So if it does, we place that in there. There might be a board rule change. You recall we had recent changes to the grading. Depending on when the faculty bring that recommendation to the Council of Academic Affairs, then if it's a board rule change, we have to lodge the board rule and then reevaluate the board rule at the next board meeting. So it depends. Those are some variables that are not standard variables that they're open to being in flux. But most of the time, as you know, the standard syllabus is standard. There's very little modification. When we changed the smoking policy and we included that smoking, that's something that we had to add in there for the benefit of our college community and the students. But when that changes, again, we also have to make a decision about whether this is something that absolutely requires immediate changes to the syllabus and can wait until the next iteration, or if it does warrant an addendum to the syllabus. And in the past, we have sent and recommended an addendum to the syllabus, and our faculty, we've had no feedback or adverse feedback from our faculty about adding addendums to the syllabus when the syllabus has already been disseminated. And that's an easy thing to do.
Okay, well, we'll definitely talk about this in our caucus. In our caucus last time, one thing that kind of came out was, yeah, we get it. Sometimes things happen, what can you do? And we need to make changes. That's fine. No one has an issue with that. The concern that was, and again, this isn't, I don't think about any particular semester or anything like that, but the thing that wanted to be prevented was this going on the bottom of the priority list for just because there are too many things to do and we can't get to it. That was the thing that I think we're seeking to prevent. So I think this comes a significant way towards accomplishing that. The thing that occurs to me that might, and again, we'll talk about it, but there could be some sort of specificity as to the type of events that cause this to be not done, or just sort of a blanket due to circumstances outside the employer's control or something. So these are probably the kind of things we're going to be talking about, and we may want to make a counter on. But I think we do appreciate this is significant movement, and we welcome it, and we'll talk about it, and I think we can make progress on this.
Absolutely. And I want to commit to our faculty, as we have, again, since January of 2016, that the standard syllabus is indeed a priority for the administration. That is the contract between you and our students. And when there are problems that occur in the classroom, and you expect us to review, respond, and defend our faculty, which we do vigorously, then that syllabus has to be accurate. So for us, it is not placed on the back burner. In fact, that is a major description of a duty of the Dean of Academic Affairs. And we discuss it every semester with academic leadership, any changes that need to be changed and involved. And sometimes faculty senate will bring matters in a recommendation, as they have, and we've honored that. So I appreciate that statement, Graham, and we're committed to making certain that it's not relegated to the bottom of the heap.
So you see there, Article 9.3 is our attempt at that compromise,
Right.
strike the balance, talk about it, let us know what you think. On all three of the ones that we just handed out, 9.3 and the 3.5 and 3.7, I did bring clean copies with me. If we do end up with if you accept these, we can sign off on them today. If you have counter proposals, let us know after the caucus. Those are the only proposals that we have with us today. The only other issue that I think we were prepared, if you wanted to discuss now or do caucus or however, was the department chair issue, further discussion on some of that. I don't know if you guys have other proposals. Or
We have a couple more, yeah. We brought one on the discipline article and looked over carefully what you brought last time. And while it doesn't look like there's a lot of changes to our proposal, I think we're probably closer on this than it may appear.
Graham, while you were passing out the TAs that you didn't have, the signed ones, is that the March 22nd?
Yeah, the first batch we did.
I'm gonna email it to you right now. I have them on email, so I'll just before I forget that, just coming your way, so you have it.
Yeah, I don't remember if I had electronic copies or not. What I don't have is a version that has your signature on it.
Yeah, and that's what I'm emailing you
So-
now is a PDF of the one for both of our
Okay.
signatures on it.
Yeah, if we could get an original ink signature before we break today, I'd appreciate that.
You want me to sign it?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Excuse me.
Okay, so I'm gonna flip to your last proposal, just to kind of refer to a little bit. There are some pieces of what you brought, which I understand is essentially reflects one or more current college policies. Some of these are pieces that we think are addressed in other articles, so we didn't include them here because we thought they were addressed elsewhere. Not necessarily a particular rejection or refusal to consider it or anything like that. It's just, we kind of have, I think this article just organized a little bit differently in our contract proposal. For instance, in section 1, paragraph A1 and paragraph C, those kind of seem more what we're calling the reduction in force, which is our Article 7. So if you want to talk about our Article 7, we're happy to do that, but we didn't include anything from those sections in our counter here because we feel that that concept is just addressed in a different place. Another thing that you don't see reflected in our counter proposal, except for a piece of section 2A, is the whole section 2 on annual contract. We, generally there aren't necessarily different disciplinary standards or procedures for employees on different types of contracts. What we did include, you can see in the very end of our proposal, which is essentially your language emphasizing that, an annual contract is an annual contract. There's no expectation of its renewal. As I think we said in our first session, we understand that, and this isn't a proposal that attempts to change that. An annual contract is still an annual contract as required by statute. But other than that, we're trying to have the same standards and procedures apply to all faculty. And I think it's I don't think yours is necessarily super different between the two, but we just thought it was simpler and easier to just kind of have everyone under one umbrella rather than kind of separating them out. There's a good amount of language in your proposal kind of elaborating on different types of offenses. We haven't included most of that language, not because we don't think any of that is good behavior necessarily, but typically in a union contract, everything disciplinary more or less is going to be subject to the just cause standard. And so all this sort of elaboration is, maybe appropriate for a policy or a code of conduct or something like that, but it's not really, in our view, something that's needed in a collective bargaining agreement. You're still free to implement policies that this certain type of conduct is or isn't permissible. But it's very unusual to have that all spelled out in that level of detail in a collective bargaining agreement. That said, we did modify one of our progressive discipline sort of provisions. We had proposed sort of the standard language that, if there's serious misconduct, you can jump the ladder of progressive discipline. We did include some of those types of misconduct, incompetence, gross insubordination, willful neglect of duty. In our view, I think those are all kind of types of misconduct anyway. But if we want to make it clear that those are also specific types of things that can result in, jumping above a mere warning to a more serious form of discipline, We think that's something that is sort of fits within the just cause standard anyway, so we didn't have an issue including that in that section. Another sort of meta difference between our two proposals is your proposal appears to only really address two types of discipline. Those are discharge and being returned to an annual contract. Ours attempts to address other levels of discipline as well. There are other types of discipline you may wish to mete out to an employee under, various circumstances, warnings, reprimands, suspensions, and things like that. So our proposal includes, outlines of procedures for all those types of discipline as well. So again, even though there may not look like there's a whole lot changed here, I think a lot of it may just be, we're sort of using this language to do slightly different things. But maybe you feel differently, and maybe this is something we need to talk more about, but that's kind of our reaction to your proposal at this time.
Well, obviously, it's something I think we're gonna have to talk about during caucus to get any questions. Let us talk about it amongst ourselves. And
I guess one thing I meant to say, we did not include the there's immorality, drunkenness, drug abuse, conviction of any crime involving moral turpitude. We didn't include that in the discipline language here. That's another one that we feel is addressed by another section of our contract. We have I don't remember exactly what section it is, but I can look it up during the caucus if you want to refer to it. Or if you want to talk about it during caucus, I'll look it up before the break. But we have a section that's essentially a right to privacy section. And as it relates to this, our view in so many words is that if the alleged misconduct doesn't have really a nexus to the employment, then it's really should be neither here nor there to the employer. So just looking at, let's look at the drunkenness or drug abuse section. Like if someone, gets into a DUI while they're driving around on campus or at a college event, I think there's a very obvious nexus between the conduct and the employment there. But, if someone's out, at a bar until very late and can't find their car and gets picked up and put in the drunk tank for the night, yeah, it's not a great thing that happened, but not really a clear nexus to employment. So I'm not sure that we'd be willing to agree to a policy that allows for discharge for something like that if there's not a clear connection to their ability to do their job.
yeah, and obviously on our proposal, that all of those categories come from the statute regulation of the board. I don't know that. You get the drunkenness one too often. And I think as to that general proposition, though, the devil's usually in the details in terms of how job related something is. The unfortunate, maybe fortunate, unfortunate, whenever I see these cases is that in the public sector, a lot of things that happen that are on your own time or don't directly relate to your job here ends up impacting the job. So it's pretty common disagreement amongst employer and union or employer and employee when you're in a disciplinary context about whether or not the employer should have any business regulating your personal life. In the private sector is a lot easier, unfortunately. In the public sector, a lot of times you do something on your own time and ends up on the front page of the paper. There's always that balance. I don't think there's any desire on college or any to overstep or get involved with trying to control personal lives. I certainly just tell employers not to do that if possible. We don't want to be responsible for everybody. Unfortunately, sometimes it blends and you end up with impact. So we'll talk about that and figure out if there's a way to balance those competing concerns. But that's that's the constant struggle with that.
Yeah, well, and I think, yeah, you probably agree, of all the different things that get, that get to arbitration, this is probably the one that is least specific to the college context in particular, and one that, a lot of arbitrators have a lot of familiarity and experience with. So that's kind of why they exist, right? Is to sort out to what extent there is that nexus, or to what extent the conduct warrants this type of discipline versus that type of discipline, or that sort of thing. So I think that's, in some sense, that's really the ultimate purpose of it, of the arbitration process, is to suss things like that out. But I mean, I think you understand our position, so we will await a response.
All right, we'll discuss it.
We have one more proposal, and this is on the business expense issue. This is another one that kind of touches a couple of contract sections, so we brought not only a counter to your proposal, but also a modification of one of our proposals, in hopes that it might be amenable. So last time we asked for some specificity and reasons that the core syllabus might be delayed. You asked for some specificity and situations where we would want some sort of cell phone provided by the college. So we've tried to do that here. In the second section, we've changed it to basically be upon request, the cell phone will be provided under these three circumstances. In the first circumstances, what we talked about for a few minutes last time, where nursing faculty have to be available to students outside of those normal business hours. And right now their options are bring a cot to the office or use their personal phone. And the nursing faculty have expressed to us various concerns about potential boundary issues with students having their personal cell phone numbers for many years beyond the termination of the faculty-student relationship. The second circumstance is kind of similar when a faculty member is supervising a student participating in some sort of internship or work experience, and they have to be accessible to the student outside of normal business hours. And then finally, when a faculty wants to do some sort of off-campus function for academic reasons, field trip type of thing, they need to be able to provide some sort of contact number for students in case of emergency, so students can get in touch with them. But then that kind of creates the same sort of issue. So that was the third one that we came up in our discussions. And for that one specifically, I think really the way we were envisioning this might work is, essentially you fill out some sort of form, and you can check out a burner phone for afternoon or however long it is, just so that students can call that number rather than faculty have to give out their personal cell phone number to address those kinds of safety concerns. But I mean, we're open to ideas or ways that it could work, or discussion about potential costs and things like that. But we felt that these are three situations that would warrant some sort of more official college number being made available to students, or college-owned number being made available to students, rather than the faculty's personal cell phone number.
One of the things that we talked about afterwards, to that point, was why we couldn't have like a call forwarding. I think apparently there was a technological ability to have, instead of giving out your cell phone number, give out an office number, but have it forwarded to nursing faculty. Is that something that why wouldn't that address that issue, I guess?
Didn't come up in our discussions.
That would happen immediately, right? It forwards it right away.
Yes, right, there's a capability, our evening administrators do that today. They do it currently where the office number is published, you just forward it to your cell phone and for however long you wish to have it forward. So when someone calls that number, it goes directly forwards to your cell phone, but the ID does not reflect your cell phone, it reflects the college phone. There's some other ideas, and again, we empathize with this. This is clearly an issue. Boundary issues are important. There are opportunities to have a fake phone number through Google Phone that can also ring totally free to your personal cell phone. You can make outgoing calls with the Google Phone number, and you can receive incoming calls. And there are just a multitude of apps on phones that have alternative phone numbers that one may use. And not only that, but not only alternative phone numbers, but alternative text messaging services. So if nursing student John or Sue want to text that they're going to be late for clinicals, et cetera, they can use one of these apps. It's a legitimate phone number with a 727-813 or 352 area code, and we could use that. And it's disposable, and I mean, there are other options than just furnishing another phone with a number, et cetera, that might be more convenient and more in line with technological trends with what businesses are using. And so I know some teachers also use it as well in K-12 to remind students. They send text messages, but they don't want to have students have their personal phone numbers. They use one of these app services. So it's worthy of reviewing.
Yeah, that didn't come up. That's an interesting idea. We'll definitely talk about it.
And we'd be happy to share some of those with the faculty. We have no problem with helping with that homework because it exists and it's, very valuable.
So one question, so for the call forwarding thing, is that something, so if I'm nursing faculty and I have clinicals, that I do every Thursday or whatever, can I do it once and set my phone between 5 p.m. and 7 a.m. to do call forwarding, and that'll do it every Thursday from then on? Or do I need to manually do it each time? How much labor is involved with getting that going?
Well, the way that I understand it, based on having used it, is you have to do it at that time. You have to do it when you need to do it. I don't know if there's a technological mechanism where you can actually program, just like you can program an email autoresponder. So, but we would have to investigate that.
Okay, that was just something that occurred to me, but we'll discuss that. It's an interesting idea. On the third paragraph, we're willing to strike that, subject to your response on the next proposal in 1411. We had discussed this a little bit last time, but there are a couple of different occasions. Most obvious one is the non-credit CPR course that's offered by the college. Nursing faculty tell us that they are not able to take that course without charge, as they might be able to credit coursework at the college. So our proposal is just essentially a modification of our previous proposal on tuition reimbursement, which we understand is different from current policy, but essentially making it clear that non-credit coursework be included in that benefit of being able to take the course free of charge. That would address the admittedly few specific needs that were motivating that third paragraph there, such as that CPR course.
Let's discuss that amongst ourselves.
And that's what we've brought today. As far as proposals go.
We don't have any other proposals. We agreed last time to continue discussing the department chair issue. That's the only other issue for us. We don't have a proposal in that regard.
You have
Happy to-
sort of a exhibit, I guess you could call it.
Okay.
So this isn't my work product, but I'm going to try and talk us through it, and if I lose the thread, I'm sure someone will rescue me. But what we've basically done here is put together, cost is always a concern for these types of things, so we put together sort of a cost of what our proposal would be. And our proposal essentially, as you'll recall, is to increase the stipends for all those chairs and directors to $8,000 and provide a 6-credit release for doing that. And so the first few lines there is essentially kind of getting at the cost of that. In arts and sciences, there's 6 of them. In health occupations, there's 8. In workforce development, there's 8. So those columns are just calculating the value of the increase to the supplement, the cost to the college of providing that release time, with the assumption that that would be picked up through, or the cost the college would incur would be at the adjunct rate in one form or other, to cover whatever coursework needed to be covered. And so just, that difference, that value of that release time multiplied by the number of people it would affect, and then adding it all up. So we get a total cost of just under $160,000 for that. The next set of tables kind of looks at what the current regime is and kind of what that means for department chairs in terms of what they're getting paid and what they would be paid, or the value of what they would be paid under our proposal. In our sort of informal survey of current department chairs, they say that in a typical week, they spend 5 to 15 hours doing their jobs. Typical week, about 10 hours. So if you divide the current stipend over the hours per week, or excuse me, the hours per year that they spend doing that, you get not much more than $10 an hour. And for comparison, Walmart committed, February or 2 ago to start paying all its employees at $11 an hour. Obviously, our faculty are overall paid considerably better than at Walmart, but for doing these chair duties, we think that the value that's the value that they're receiving for that is not commensurate with the value that produces to the departments. And then the bottom set of lines in that table is spelling out kind of what the wage would be under what we're proposing, which is that $8,000 stipend instead of the $5,000 one, and the value to the faculty member of having the time of having 6 credit hours of release, $55,000 being the average faculty salary. So that turns into it's not a cost of $19,000 to the college, it's a value of $19,000 to the faculty member, the difference coming from the difference between the faculty member salary and the adjunct rate. So the value to that faculty member would be, it would become about $38 an hour, assuming they spend about 500 hours a year on those duties. So that's kind of where we're coming from in terms of the cost of our proposal versus the value that it would provide for the faculty members who do that. For all the reasons we discussed last time, we still think that department chairs in all the divisions are a very useful and beneficial thing to have. It's something that's very widely and deeply felt amongst the faculty. And we feel that the proposal that we're bringing forward, obviously subject to everything else economic, is within reason and fair to those faculty members.
Just 2 questions of clarification. Can you just repeat the feedback you received from the chairs regarding how many hours per week they put into those duties specifically?
It varies from week to week, but generally
Range.
generally it was 5 to 15, depending on how busy the week is. Average of about 10.
And does this proposal include the stipulation that the department chairs would no longer be able to teach extra pay or supplemental courses.
So I think, Vlad, so the proposal that you had brought, had something saying that department chairs can, or they can't teach any, or maybe they can only teach one. I don't remember exactly what it was, but that piece of it, we're willing to accept. I don't know that that was specifically looked at in this. I think we were just looking at assuming they have a full-time load and get the 6 hours of release. I don't think there's any consideration of current overloads. But for what it's worth, for whatever effect that has on the position here, we did accept the administration's proposal previously to not allow or to place limits on the number of overloads being the department chairs can teach.
No.
We'll discuss it amongst ourselves. I know the department chair issue, we discussed at length last time around. We didn't have Dr. Jeanette with us, so he's far more knowledgeable on these than I am, so we did want to give him the opportunities. He did go back and review the meeting, and my suggestion to be able to discuss some of these things. You want to give your insight on some of that?
Certainly, and again, I appreciate the opportunity to share some reflections. So I took the liberty to pen some reflections, listen to all the faculty feedback, so I'd like for everyone to understand the underlying rationale and expectations, building upon the feedback that I provided to you in the initial session when we talked about the proposal about the possibility of removing department chairs in arts and sciences, but keeping, of course, the health programs as program directors and keeping the workforce chairs as program directors. And I'll preface it by saying that I appreciate the acknowledgement from the union that the current department chair structure in the Division of Arts and Sciences has not worked effectively. So that's a step in the right direction that we both concur about that. We agree on the fundamental reason that has triggered the administration to consider an organizational change in the Division of Arts and Sciences. We agree on that. I'm also very grateful to the union that you've acknowledged and responded favorably, as you've just articulated, Graham, to the college's concern about the teaching of overloads concurrently with the department chair duties. The department chair reorganization recommendation stems from years worth of observations and feedback from faculty themselves, from the chairs, from individual non-chair faculty, from full-time and adjunct faculty, from students, from the deans who supervise them, the provosts, the associate deans on the campus who interface with the department chairs, and of course, consultation with the president. And, contrary to the implication of the last meeting that the department chair structure is indeed meeting the college's core values of success, excellence, stewardship, and community, the unvarnished reality is that in the Division of Arts and Sciences, this simply is not the case. Of course, the college, again, has no issue with the program director outcomes in the other divisions, and in fact proposes select increases, as you'll remember, in areas in the Division of Nursing and Health Programs. And we can discuss those, of course, if they were not initial proposal to make it more equitable. The removal of the department chair structure in the division and the addition of a new administrator will not change the primary ownership of the faculty over the curriculum matters. We've articulated that time and time again. Course development, student learning outcomes, course selection, course modification, textbook selection, instructional material selection, that in no way will be adversely impacted by the change that we are entertaining moving forward with in our proposal. The division, as we articulated, will consist of curriculum cluster committees, will include faculty from the respective clusters, and they're going to chair the committee, and they'll shepherd those curriculum matters through the associate dean and through the dean to the Council of Academic Affairs to the District Board of Trustees. Note that it's important to highlight that the nursing department has the same configuration as the proposal. An associate dean who reports to the dean, 4 accreditation-based committees, each focusing on select accreditation and curriculum matters with its own committee chair or lead who voluntarily serves and is elected by peers. The same process would be followed by arts and sciences in this case. In fact, I want to make it clear that you'll understand relevant precedence exists for this reorganization proposal. In the recent past, some of you might recall that the nursing department had program directors for each of the nursing programs. Because of similar concerns, namely that program directors were simply not fulfilling obligations, in addition to some other internal rift activities that led less to engagement and operating as one team, but more to fragmentation, the college decided to remove the program director structure and maintain the faculty committee configuration. This occurred under the previous administration, it's important to note, and has continued to work well. The college's recent ASIN accreditation reaffirmation and the curriculum changes that routinely passed through the Council of Academic Affairs to the District Board of Trustees attest to the effectiveness of that model. We've seen absolutely no diminution of faculty voice in the Division of Nursing, the Department of Nursing, Division of Nursing and Health Programs. And our metrics with our students are also an attestation to that. The department develops, modifies, proposes, evaluates, changes curriculum as a result of faculty engagement and their commitment as a team. Now, when I reviewed the video, and again, I appreciate the sentiment and the emotional connection that you have with this position, and I value that greatly, having supervised multiple deans who supervised the department chairs, and at one time having been a dean who also supervised department chairs. The statements about having a top-down structure that were stated, quote unquote, focused on communication, curriculum familiarity, the need to have an intermediary between the administration and the faculty, it appears that there's an implicit bias, right? An implicit prejudice against the administration. I'm glad you find that laughable.
I'm sorry.
It's not true, but,
It's not
well,
true, Stan.
I'm telling, if you can give me the opportunity to express my position.
you the opportunity.
Thank you.
Boy, oh, boy.
Thank you. But to a reasonable person, it appears that there is some level of bias and prejudice against administration. And the department chair work and duties that are claimed in the argument simply have not occurred and are not occurring. And here's the operative concern of ours: in an orderly, systematic, and consistent manner. And while certain chairs, we acknowledge, we admit, we laud certain chairs who have worked diligently and very professionally, they have, and we value them. They're tremendous. Each chair is not shouldering that same level of commitment, that same level of dedication, that same level of capability, and the same level of effort. It's simply not happening. And the entire system, because of that, becomes dysfunctional. And that is what is happening here. And that is what demands an institutional response. Furthermore, the college rejects the claim that, quote, the department chairs are a necessary liaison between the faculty and the administration. While I have no doubt, and I know for a fact, you're correct, this may indeed be the case in many other institutions of higher learning, I will emphasize that this is not the case at Paso Hernando State College. This is an incorrect descriptor of the department chair role. While their responsibility indeed does include the provision and assistance and support to the dean and leadership to their faculty colleagues, it does not include being an intermediary, a liaison, a conduit between the faculty and the administration. The academic dean, who supervises individual faculty in the full-time faculty in the division, has the direct supervisory relationship with the faculty and regularly, on a daily basis, almost on an hourly basis, communicates directly with faculty on matters of import, as do the provosts, as do the associate deans, as do I. Just the last 2 weeks, I had 10 formal communications with faculty from 3 different divisions on everything from mentoring, career guidance, curriculum concerns, and projects that they want to institute. And at no point there was there a department chair as an intermediary sitting in my office in that email string or on that phone conversation. And I'll also say that they have regular discussions with the Student Affairs Administration, our Vice President of Student Affairs, our Dean of Student Affairs, regular, with no department chair being the conduit. We acknowledge that the department chair serves as a voice for the respective department on curriculum matters. That is absolutely true, and we value that. But it does not replace the relationship between the dean, who directly supervises the faculty, and the individual faculty. And contrary to the argument, faculty do indeed frequently share concerns, recommendations, and reflections for improvement and innovation directly with the administration, sans the presence of the chair and without the chair's interpretation of the matter or involvement in the communication. The chair role, in this case, based on that argument, based on that predicate, is neither necessary nor sufficient for this purpose. Nor does the chair serve as the conduit that transmits information from the dean to the other administrators or other faculty parties. We often have discussions routine meetings directly with faculty, and you know that, initiated by our faculty, without a chair. If the conclusion stemming from the premise that chairs are necessary, intermediaries is valid, let's just do the thought experiment. If that conclusion that you proffer to us is valid, then the faculty who are represented by the chairs do not know it. Or if they know it, they don't agree with it because they're not following that model. And it's not happening. You know, it's difficult to fathom the respect that, contrary to conventional wisdom, that we have for faculty in arts and sciences, that they're incapable of advancing curriculum without a department chair. It's difficult to fathom that that's happening. Our faculty, we know, we cherish, we protect, we escalate, we laud. We are proud of them in our community. They have the intellect, they have the capabilities, they have the moral sense that will direct them to do what's best for their students, their discipline in the department. They exhibited this professionalism prior to the department chair implementation. During department chair vacancies, right? It doesn't collapse when there's a vacancy, and I'm confident they're going to continue to do it in the future, if indeed this proposal goes forward. As with other matters and articles that most assuredly surface throughout the collective bargaining activities, viewing the college's emphasis and plan for continuous improvement as a personal affront to faculty prevents listening, it prevents problem solving necessary to a collegial environment focused on impacting our students' lives. Continuous improvement is critical, as is self-reflection, as is introspection and self-criticism, and a willingness to embrace future alternatives if the success is not being achieved now. You know, my commitment to you, representing the president and our administration, is that we are using only truth as the only rationale and the only justification that warrants the necessity for this change. There's nothing else in there beneath that. No political stuff, no there's no personalities involved here. It's based on the fundamentals. And although there will be undoubtedly disagreement, and we know that, and actually we cherish that because that's the fundamental aspect of higher education, philosophically wrestling with ideas based on disagreement. The fact is that even though there's that disagreement in the perception, as Flannery O'Connor once stated, the truth does not change according to our ability to stomach it. And I will add to Flannery's statement, nor does it change because the purveyor of that truth is a representative from the administration. The reason we are moving forward with this proposal that we brought to you in good faith is because this model is flawed right now in arts and sciences. It has not worked, and it's not working. We have had inconsistent district-wide responsibility outcomes in the performance of these duties and responsibilities in the role. And as you all know, despite multiple meetings and despite listening to the chairs and implementing, my colleague friends, implementing recommendations and modifications that they specifically asked us to implement in good faith, still there's a breakdown. Still, there's a breakdown, despite the administration listening and doing what those chairs asked. Recently, when I met with all of them in arts and sciences. So let me specifically enumerate, and I'm almost completed with this reflection, some of the reasons that are included, but are not limited. And by the way, these are under 3 different recent deans.
That's part of the problem.
True, that's part of the problem. We can discuss that. 3 different deans. Training, mentoring, recruiting, developing and evaluating our adjunct faculty and our dual enrollment faculty, in addition to the new full-time faculty members who are just onboarded. And what about the full-time faculty that many department chairs know are not performing well, know that they're struggling, speak about their colleagues in the corridors, but have done nothing to support them. And then when a recommendation of non-renewal occurs, then the administration is chastised for not renewing a contract for something that they all knew all along was a problem. Where has that mentoring been for the colleagues that we purport to support? Interfacing with the campus associate deans relevant to curriculum and adjunct faculty, attending campus adjunct meetings, holding sessions. You know, we hear broad sweeping, overgeneralized rhetoric disparaging our adjunct faculty, and it's been consistently spewed instead of providing solutions. You know, while failing to address the problem sometimes with full-time colleagues' issues. Why is it all about the adjunct faculty not performing to certain standards when you know very well that we have some of the finest, most outstanding adjunct faculty in the system teaching for us based on capabilities and based on passion and based on ethics? And when we look ourselves in the mirror, many of us, and I say us, I came from that rank, and many we've hired came from the adjunct faculty pools. They're to be respected just as our full-time faculty members are. But if there are problems, we work with them. We just don't disparage them or indicate that they're the reason why curriculum is horrid. What about effectively reviewing and participating in the master course schedule process, focused on the best interests of our students college-wide? At the last master course schedule meeting, the most recent one, a month and a half ago, only 2 chairs provided their faculty schedules to our current dean in arts and science. There's been a failure to effectively recognize scheduling problems with a sincere, global, multi-campus approach. And it appears, and has been stated, that there's some inherent biases toward one campus, or even biases towards certain select colleagues' capability to make load if a particular campus decides to very strategically, for the benefit of the students, develop some opportunities for students to take courses that are necessary. And again, reasonable solutions have not been proposed to offer how we're going to move forward from this. And when that happens, they're incompatible with our mission in reaching our students. There have been problems with facilitating candid, transparent departmental information. Because sometimes in departments, there's confusion between the dean's perception, the dean's directive, what transpires at Council on Academic Affairs, and what is shepherded down to the faculty members. How about effectively addressing curriculum matters, curriculum improvement matters, particularly in the face of controversy or disagreement? Until recently, regularly scheduled meetings with faculty and chairs were not occurring. I asked the deans to demand that our department chairs have regularly scheduled meetings with their faculty. Those just weren't occurring in person. Some were, but it was not a consistent enterprise. It's insufficient to say, we want to change these course outcomes, here's an email, let me know if you all agree. That's not considered a faculty meeting. They weren't happening. So when we talk about liaisoning and being a conduit, where has it been there? Faculty sometimes would inquire about curriculum matters despite the abundant representation of the chairs on the Council on Academic Affairs. In certain cases, departmental proposals would go forth, something as radical as deleting a program or a curriculum or a deletion of courses, And there's been no discussion on the front lines with the faculty who are represented by those chairs. Almost like unilateral bringing forward a decision, but faculty X on a peripheral campus was clueless. Is that representation? What about candidly communicating faculty perspectives to the academic dean and other administrators? Non-chair faculty regularly meet with their dean, with the provost, with the associate deans, and with me. In fact, one recent meeting I had with a faculty member who brought a phenomenal proposal forward. And after my meeting, I gave that faculty member some feedback about the next steps on how to make this happen. And I said, have you talked to your chair? Please make sure to talk to your chair. Make sure to talk to the dean. I see this as a worthy enterprise for the college and for your department, and you have my full support on it. Until recently, student learning outcome assessment and curriculum, use of results were not addressed by our chairs. The reason the college was placed on a monitoring report with our accreditor was because of the lack of student learning outcomes and assessment and the use of results. Arts and sciences struggled with that. Note that in some cases, it's abundantly clear that friendships, maybe some cronyism, maybe some favoritism permeates the department. And even, yes, I'll say fear. You'll recall one of the session 4, when the discussion about faculty being afraid to debate and dialogue about concerns with the administration. And you saw my very strong response. I use the word abhorrent because it's just simply not happening. We don't retaliate against faculty who disagree with the administration. We welcome it because that leads to change. Well, we've known that there's been some situations within the faculty ranks that have affected decisions in the past. There have been faculty who have suppressed their communication or their disagreement with select chairs because of fear, the chair's status, the chair's veteran status that's invoked, and how that will impact the relationship and the future standing at the institution. Certain faculty have even engaged in ad hominem attacks on their chairs, even shaming them for making a decision that's disagreeable. In fact, we have no place for shaming of colleagues because they disagree with one another. There's no community there, that's our value, and certainly there's no collegiality. And I can tell you very clearly, department chairs, to others, and to me personally, have openly disparaged their deans when the chairs were called to account for problems that were not addressed, but should have been addressed. These flawed interpersonal dynamics are not in keeping with any of the college values, notably success, excellence, community, and I'll add safety. And they do nothing, they do nothing to advance the cause of the faculty or the department, let alone our students. I'll tell you, recently we had instances of inaction necessary to address student complaints. Students will say, I met with the department chair, and then it's never moved forward or nothing has happened. In one case, a faculty member apparently reported information to a chair who elected not to form the campus administration about a barrage of student complaints about a particular instructor that ultimately escalated to unacceptable levels and required drastic administrative response, yet that chair was aware of it. Students were adversely affected because of that failure to act. And as a result of this, we had to take drastic measures, but that could have been easily addressed if that person did their job. And I'm going to tell you, it's important to underscore that we have had problems, as you know, filling the department chair roles in the past. And individuals have accepted the position with lackluster enthusiasm, almost as a last resort because no one else wanted it. In fact, feedback from the current dean indicates that 2 of the chairs, she knows for a fact, will not reapply moving forward. And no faculty are interested in inheriting that position. So then that leads us to square one, where we are now. What happens? Does the college fall apart? Does the department no longer function? Does the division go in shambles? No. It's going to resort to faculty as a committee, together working collaboratively as one unit, taking on the role of the department chair. And I can continue on and on And I haven't even included, when I was the dean, some of the situations that occurred back then. But there are instances that are so disturbing that out of respect for those parties, I absolutely will not disclose those scenarios. Now, ultimately, each of these aforementioned areas impacts our students, and our students are the foundation for for the change. Our students are. And you know, as well as I do, what I just shared is the truth. There's no hyperbole here. There's no exaggeration. There's no make-believe. This is the truth that led us to get to this position. So in sum, in addition to the management rights that we have, compelling justification exists to support the proposal. It's not about the chairs. It's not about the administration. It's about the students. Nonetheless, the administration believes that the changes will not only support the betterment of our students, but they'll actually benefit equally the betterment of our faculty and the departments. So I will close this reflection with a quote. That was a question that was posed to me from a well-respected faculty member within the Division of Arts and Sciences when I did my listening rounds 3 years ago when I absorbed the position of Vice President of Academic Affairs and College Provost. Quote, what is the role of the chairs? Help me understand that. What do they actually do to make a difference? And then here was the salient ending. When are you going to fix the fractured department chair system? So in closing, I'm going to ask that question of you, my union colleagues. You already have acknowledged, and I appreciate it greatly, representing the president and chairing this committee, that you've acknowledged that the problems exist. You've acknowledged it, and I thank you for that. If you want to maintain the status quo, we are listening. How do you propose to address this problem? We're open to changing this position. We're not married to this position. That's part of the negotiation. And we're open to listening to you. And while we appreciate your desire to have increased pay and release time, how do you propose to remedy the underlying fundamentals, the philosophical underpinnings of these problems within the arts and sciences structure? That is our sincere question to you in the spirit of collaboration and good faith.
So we'll be taking a break to discuss this and other things. But I know just very generally, this is not an issue that I have intimate familiarity with.
Yes.
But the general thrust of some of the conversations that I've witnessed has been, yes, there are certain things that aren't working. I don't know there's necessarily agreement on all the same, on an identical set of problems. However, what I've generally heard is a better solution would be to take a look at what the department chairs are doing, what should they be doing, what shouldn't they be doing, and there are things perhaps they shouldn't be doing that should be done by someone else. So rather than, and again, this is just general for us conversation, it seems to be, let's take a look at what they were doing some number of years ago, what's been added since then, what was added later, what was added later. There's a feeling that many things have been added and that's kind of pushed it to the breaking point. That said, I mean, if you're willing to entertain proposals about, like a job description for department chairs, I'm sure we could come up with something. That being a permissive subject of bargaining, we didn't necessarily invest the effort in bringing that forward. Determining what different positions do is a management right. But if you want to have that discussion in the bargaining context, I think we're happy to do that. But that's just very generally the type of conversation I've been hearing is, how can we be expected, or we or they, depending on who's talking. There are so many different things that need to be doing. There's not enough time to do it, and I don't want to deal with this. So I think generally what you can probably expect to come from our side is more of a, let's talk about what department chairs should be doing rather than let's talk about what we should have instead of department chairs. And again, that's very general, but we'll talk about it. And maybe today, maybe next time, I think we can probably get you some more pointed, specific responses to the question that you posed.
Yeah, I think that would be appreciated. obvious from both sides. Third side, last time, listening to Dr. Jeanette, there was a lot of emotion and passion in this issue, but I think it's, we've been a little spoiled up till now and talking a lot about the boilerplate stuff. No strike causes, things of that nature, where you're trying to get the initial contract right, but as a practical matter, it's not the kind of thing that is going to move the needle much. This is one that is different. Obviously, it's what you guys deal with on a day-to-day basis. Whether you, I would just caution on both sides, really, that I can see when you guys are talking or listening to Dr. Jeanette, I can see some of the reaction, and you probably saw our side the same way around. It's not about whether we agree with all the facts and perspectives at this point. I mean, we can make it about that. We get nowhere fast, right? It's really about how do we get to where we want to be. Graham said there's probably a dozen different ways to get there, but I think what you've heard from Dr. Jeanette is this morning, the perspective of the administration as to what's not been working up till now. And we heard your perspective last time. We now need to figure out how we get to where we want to be. I will emphasize, I think Dr. Jeanette did mention it, that we haven't made any decision yet as to what we're doing. Candidly, I think whether we create an administrative position as we propose to have that ability to do in our initial proposal is a management right, but we want to talk about it here. We obviously will bargain over any impact on that on the department chairs. But I did want to bring us back around to our initial proposal was only to consider this maybe as early as July 1 of this year, but no decisions have been made. So the reason I raised that is I think it does present an opportunity between now and then to try and figure out what we do, because we're not wed to any option yet. I will also raise, I know that Dr. Beard indicated to me that faculty reached out to him and wanted to have a forum with him or meeting. And as you probably have learned, I have advised him not to do that. Candidly, I don't want to be the bad guy, but to the extent we're talking about it here, we're not going to talk about it in other forums. You have the right to ask that, or if you have, I think you said there was a petition or something along those lines, we're happy to take that here or hear your concerns. But so long as he's following my advice, I'm going to continue to tell him not to discuss things that we're talking about in bargain outside of bargaining. And there's some legal concerns, whether there's some sunshine law issues, but you could have a meeting that's not negotiation, but frankly, my perspective is that's counterproductive. Just to let you guys know that it's not necessarily him wanting to be a bad guy, it's the attorney telling him not to do it. So I don't know if maybe now's a good time to caucus.
Now, can I make a couple
Yeah,
comments?
I'd like you to do that too.
I want to
Uh,
ask a question.
Go ahead.
I have one question, and I've been here 7 years, so I don't know what happened before me. But have you ever actually tried to pay department chairs competitively and also give them competitive release time so they actually have the time to do their job? I'm just curious. Has that ever happened?
Not in the 11 years or 13 years I've been here now.
Dr. Jeanette would have to respond to that. I mean, I guess I can foresee the response might be,
Because I
you
would
consider competitive and there's a lot of assumptions built into that.
I believe that when we had that meeting, was it 2 years ago, the ad hoc?
2016, yeah.
Right, I believe they haven't changed the compensation since 2001,
Since it was
it?
first conceived.
No,
So it's like
2005,
2005 or
it's
something like
never changed.
I can say currently, the average stipend across the state is $7,500 to $9,000, with at least 3 credits of release time each, and some go as high as 12,000 with 3 credits release time, and some give 6 credits release time with their $7,500 to $9,000 stipend, and we're nowhere near that. So I'm just curious, especially when you do the math and you've got $10 an hour. I wouldn't work for that either.
Right, and I appreciate that question. So then fundamentally, again, let's go back to the validity of the premise that
Well,
leads to
have
the argument.
we ever paid them? So
But here's the question. So first, the fundamental premise then is that people are applying for these positions and taking the positions very well knowing what the current structure is, correct? So if that's the case, there's, well, that's the case that they should, then if they're applying to the position with the existing structure, then the implicit, by virtue of the contract that comes forth as a supplemental contract that they're giving to the college is, I know what I'm getting paid, and I'm committed to doing the work because they've seen the job description, they did an interview with the deans, and they interview with me.
But you're saying that
So-
nobody
so-
wants the job.
Beg your pardon?
You
Well,
you
recently,
told
that's
us
the,
earlier that
that's the
nobody wants
feedback.
the job.
yes,
So-
that's the feedback I
But
received.
you don't see a correlation between nobody wants a job that is a great amount of work with no pay with it, no release time for it.
No, you're right, and
Do you
there,
see the problem
there may
here?
be, and you use the word correlation, there may be a correlation. And, but again, the premise is, the fundamental premise is that money and incentivization necessarily leads to motivation and better quality work. And, we might take issue with that, and there's a lot of research that doesn't necessarily support that. But I will say to you, as evidenced by our behaviors with the leadership transition, one of the first things we did when Dr. Beard appointed me to vice presidency, and I told him one of the concerns I wanted to do was review the department chair remuneration scheme. We put together a specific task force. We had a committee chaired by Dr. Richardson. That task force was the first time that ever happened in the history of the college, where we brought together the program directors and the chairs to have candid discussions and feedback about what was transpiring. As a result of that, to Grant's point, there were modifications to the job description based on that feedback. There was a different evaluation mechanism that was produced. We went from program coordinators to program directors, and a salary, an incremental salary increase structure was presented from that committee to me, that was supported by our Vice President of Finance, Mr. Horn, and I met with the president and took that, and Dr. Beard supported it. And in good faith, I brought that forward, supporting the faculty remuneration increases across the board to $8,000. Now, but you'll recall, it did not go through because those are the years, that was the year, we had dramatic budgetary challenges, we had frozen positions, and we did the subsequent year. So the effort did occur based on exactly the acknowledgement that you're expressing, Kate. But here's where, going back to the perception of the administration. For the almost 1 year of deliberation that occurred, where faculty colleagues getting together, do you want to know how one chair described that at the meeting when Mr. Koji came to educate faculty about the union? It was described as a sham. It was just a sham process. And again, that in no way furthers the collegiality that we've always had and that we're trying to advance. It was not a sham. That statement is just utterly, grotesquely offensive to the people who work so hard, including the colleagues who participated in it. So to say that it was a sham, obviously, was painful and offensive. So it wasn't a sham because we did take it forward. The fact that it wasn't approved, as other colleagues in the administration bring forward agenda items that aren't approved based on the budgetary challenges, does not negate or minimize the fact that we did a good faith effort to address a problem that we, as the new administration, recognized. We recognize it.
I think we recognize that efforts were made.
Yeah.
But, right, I mean,
I was on the committee, I didn't feel it was a sham. I didn't either, I was on that committee as well, I didn't feel it was a sham, I felt like it went to a certain point, and then, as you said, there was some economic downturn in terms of funding, but it hasn't been revisited now, and it should be, it's still there, I still have what we proposed, I've got copies of that. But it never was, it was never revisited, and it needs to be.
And I will tell you, and the deans, all three deans can attest, that we had discussed revisiting it. We had discussed even modifying some changes as we put in the one of the articles, our recommendation as a referenced in my discussion with certain technical health program directors. But of course, then we became a union college. So we cannot unilaterally move that forward. And now everything has to come through the union, right? So, and again, it's somewhat perplexing and mystifying that we laugh at some of these commentary, but the other day I had a meeting with the Faculty Senate president, and she shared with me 3 matters that were ratified by the Faculty Senate. And while I appreciate that the Faculty Senate ratified them, and she shared them with me and with Dr. Beard, the reality is I expressed to her that there must be some disconnect between the Faculty Senate and the union representation, because though each of these matters has been proffered to the college in the form of an article. So the union is the official legal collective bargaining representative of the faculty now, even though the Faculty Senate is critically important, but we can't move on these without moving on the articles. So that has impacted decision-making, as you can tell, and that's why we're here. It's not as easy as it once was for us to say, we're taking forward a faculty change to remuneration without first being addressed here. And it will be addressed. You've got it in your articles, and we'll have, I'm sure, counter proposals.
Can I say something now? This is my perception of today. First of all, I do not believe we have bias against the administration. We have criticisms about the administration. We don't think things are going as well as they should be. That's why we unionize. But we have no bias against the administration. You and I have been friends for a long time. I have nothing against you personally. However, I have heard, this is my perception again, that several times we've been called liars today. Spreading falsehoods or whatever the word was used. I don't think we do that. We try to be honest as much as we can, and we don't tell anybody untruths. So I take offense to those allegations made against us today. I also, just something you just mentioned about the Faculty Senate president, there was a thing that was passed about gun control and having guns on campus. I don't recall having an article about that. I may be wrong, but I don't understand why that couldn't be addressed. Why is everything now being, oh, we can't do this because you're unionized? There should still be a dialogue, just like the president. I think what's now happening with the president is you're shutting us off completely. I can understand the sunshine issue maybe with the chairs, but what I feel is the administration is gathering the wagons and protecting everybody so we no longer have communication. We want to have a two-way street here, Stan, and I don't think it's happening. I really don't. But otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here today if it was happening. And you know, as I said before, there is an element of fear. I'm sorry to tell you that, but there is. You know, I scoffed at you simply because of that, you know, saying that we have this problem with administration. We don't have anything personally against you or Dr. Beard or anybody in administration. We just want this college to be a damn good college. And we don't think it is yet.
See, but that's, if I may, see, we have a different perspective because we believe we are a damn outstanding college precisely because of the role that faculty play. That's what a major factor. Do we accept that there is need for continuous improvement? Absolutely. That is the part of leadership, humility, where we consistently have shown, as you know, we have made changes. And I hope that you would recognize them for the betterment of our faculty. But when we have broad brushed overgeneralizations, sweeping over the generalizations, and tactics that are meant to foment fear and, so quite frankly, despair amongst our faculty about what's transpiring, that doesn't lead to the betterment of the enterprise.
I don't know where those tactics are coming from.
Well, if I may,
Sorry.
I will clarify that you indicated that at no point did we say lie. At no point did we say that you were playing with the truth. I just asked that if you're going to advance an argument and a proposition vis-a-vis the syllabus, that we just make sure that everything's on the table so that contextually we're operating accurately, right? We're not invoking ancient history for something that that is no longer happening. It did happen. We accept that. We acknowledge it. It was totally wrong. We addressed it. So at least we have some acknowledgement that the administration has addressed something for the betterment of our faculty, right? So that's the difference in the perspective and the perception.
I can understand that, but you have to understand our perspective as well. The other thing is, I really didn't appreciate today being talked down to, because I felt like we've been talked down to several times in these negotiations. We should be an equal partner in this and not looked at as somebody below other people. And I really feel that we've been talked down to. Again, that's my personal perception. Maybe other people in the room don't feel that, but it's just mine. And I'll shut up. Go ahead.
Yeah, Stan, I want to address this, Chairman. I want to get back on topic here. Okay, first of all, I'll apologize for interrupting your perspective. My comment was inappropriate. I apologize for that. But I got to tell you, I've been here 20 years. And I was here when the chairman's job was created. And I disagree with your attitude or your perspective on that. The chairman's job was created as a recommendation from 2 SACs ago that there was a disconnect in communication between administration and the faculty. And a way to remedy that was to establish a chairman who would be faculty, who would then report to the dean as a communication bridge between faculty and the administration. It was originally set up for that reason, as being one of the original chairs, second chair of the biology department. That was absolute fact, all right? So the idea that it's not there for that purpose is incorrect. That's why it was originally established. Now, as a scientist, I will tell you that this chairman's job has evolved. It's evolution, all right? When the original chairman's job was done, it was very doable, and nobody took 15 extra credit classes. You had enough time to do your job, but what they did was reasonably, they were able to do it. Administration asked them. But the job over time has evolved. As the college has evolved, as more things have happened, the responsibility to the chairman's job has grown to the point where it is very difficult for a chairman teaching a full load to do the chairman's job at the same time. That is the fault of multiple areas. It's the fault of administration, it's the fault of the faculty. We have never addressed these things or fixed them. The chairman's job is very, very important. I think it's essential to the communication of this college, okay? I do not disagree with you on any point that it is absolutely broken. There is no question it's broken. But to get rid of it is a mistake. To fix it is the remedy. There are things we can do to fix this, okay? I absolutely do not agree, and I don't think anyone here disagrees, with chairmen should not be allowed to teach a lot of extra pay overload courses. It doesn't do the faculty any good. It doesn't do the administration or the students any good. That we have no problem with, okay? That's just wrong. If you're teaching so much that you can't do the job, don't do the job, all right? Now, there's no question about that, but can we come to some kind of an agreement where the chairman's job can be maintained, but we can, one, come to an agreement as to what the chairman's expected and give him some release time. The money, you know, that's negotiable, but it's not the major issue. The major issue is time. They don't have the time to do it. Do I think that some chairmen take advantage of that? Absolutely. They don't do the job. They're not doing a service to anyone. But I really do feel that giving this up would be a disservice to this college, all right? No one understands their area of the arts and science department, Stan, better than someone who's in biology or in math. There's no dean that's going to be able to relate to that directly. It's not going to happen. They see the things. And the faculty tell the chairman, he brings it to the dean, and the dean passes it up, and you deal with stuff like that, all right? It's a direct connection. It absolutely is, and it's an essential one, and it works for us in biology for the most part, okay? So I just wanted to bring that perspective to it, right? To get rid of it is not, I don't think, in the best interest of the students or the college or the faculty. There's a compromise there, okay? We gotta fix this. We didn't expect to grow like we did. We grew, and the chairman's job became more and more important and more involved. But we have to fix that or adjust that along with it, all right? So I wanted to add that perspective, all right? It's a communication thing. It's important, all right? I truly do believe that if you cut off that communication, yeah, we're free to go, but that's not always the most way that most faculty feel they're comfortable with, okay? Now, if chairmen aren't doing their job, Who's responsible for making sure they do their job, all right? Does the dean need to say, look, you're not doing your job, get your act together? I wouldn't have a problem with that, somebody saying that to me if that was it, okay? And finally, I will tell you that the lack of interest in the chairman's job is for the reasons I've just proposed to you, all right? It's too much for anyone to handle, all right? They want to do it, but they can't do their job effectively and do all these things expected of them without going out of their mind. And it's why they're not doing it, Stan, that's why. It's not complicated, all right? It really isn't. So if we can come to a compromise where we can make this job doable, okay, I think you'll find more people are interested in getting involved, because they really do want to get involved, they just don't want to go mad doing it, okay? So, thanks. All right.
Or take a pay cut doing it too, where if you're teaching a bunch of overloads, at this point, to take a chairman position, you would have to drop them, and you're looking at a stipend that doesn't even cover your overloads. So, and the extra time involved in doing it. So at that point, you look at the math and go, no, and you walk away.
I agree with many of the things. I won't say I agree with everything you said, all right, but I will say with a lot of what you said is true, all right? But that's not, I don't think, justification for dismissing the position. I think it's reason to fix the position and make it better, and I think we can absolutely do that, no question about it.
To your
I've been
point, I'm sorry, the financial impact is not insignificant.
No,
So the value of the chart here to implement the proposals would be $160,000 in new money. I don't think Brian Horns
Oh, it's
was,
not here today.
but he would freak out, I know at that. We would love to be able to do it.
Right, Brian, I mean, if we hire another administrator in that position, it's gonna be an impact of new money as well, so.
Right, but if you look at just the arts and science, the proposal, just looking at your numbers here, the current money and the new money for that arts and science alone is $69,000 total.
No, it's 38. Wait,
Not
no,
with the
no.
current, it's 69, right, because you have the current stipend.
No, the
already.
additional money, they already get 5,000, that's the current stipend.
Right, well, that's what I'm
So they
saying,
have
if you take,
3,000 additional stipend from now. Right now they get 5,000. We want to increase it to 8,000, so that's 3,000 additional per chair. There's six credits of release time per chair per year at the adjunct rate. If we pay an adjunct to do their classes, that's $39,000, which
right, so
average
that's the
associate-
additional,
that's just the
plus
addition.
the 30,000 in current. So
Oh,
I'm
I
saying
see
if we
what
did
you're
away with the current
Yes.
department chairs,
But
voted all that money, it'd be $69,000 for
which is less
associate
than a
dean.
Still
dean.
less than a dean.
A dean makes 80 some.
But it's a different role,
I
right?
understand,
It's
but
an
then,
administrator role.
Yeah, which is money.
We're just talking
well,
about.
let me
I'm
finish.
talking about money. I'm not talking about, yeah. it's a different
Okay,
money.
so I don't know what the associate deans would make here, but that, I'm assuming it's not a huge gap, but that would be then a position devoted to doing all the things that aren't being done. It may be more challenging, that's something we can speak to certainly, in that they don't have the
Money is an
expertise.
issue, but it's not the main issue. The main issue is should we do away with this chairman job, okay?
You're telling us that the way to fix that is to
Well,
give it more
I'm
money.
saying
so
that
how's
one
it
of
not
the
be-
things
that's
that we
fine.
can talk about in terms of overall fixing it might include the monetary compensation, but it's not necessarily the major topic of this, all right? I think it's time, all right? It's time. They need time to do the job. It's too overwhelming. It's evolved to the point where not one person can do their job as a faculty and administration properly as well. So it's a time thing. Is money a factor? Yeah, but it's not the major factor, okay? It's just one thing that needs to be considered in overall fixing the problem, all right? The idea is a good one. The chairman is a good idea. It just needs to be fixed, and that's what we want to do, rather than just abandon it altogether. That's all.
As an 11-year chair that used to do all science and now just does physical science, and I have never worked an overload unless we got in a bind and I had to, or possibly because my hours didn't work out. The bigger piece with the way the job has changed in that 11 years is truly the time. That is a big piece, because if you're teaching even a full load and your responsibility are adjuncts at high schools or adjuncts, you have to mentor them at another campus, which I know I routinely do. Meet them at other campuses, work with them. How do you fit that in when you are teaching a full load? Sometimes at 2 campuses. So I would say, I'm gonna support, it's time under the current job description. You gotta have the time to be able to meet those. And I know, I take a little bit of an offense, Dr. Jeanette. There are some chairs in the current group and in the previous groups that spend so much time, and we are not all doing the job to the same level. And that needs to be clear to the committee on your side, is that there are routinely certain ones that show up at all the meetings, partake in all the meetings, provide the schedules on time, do what, and meet the deadlines deemed put. And some do not, and that is the dean's responsibility if somebody is not doing their job to not renew them.
And you articulated what I said, and I was very clear to say that there are individuals who are performing in a very effective way. And again, this is not focused on the person, it's focused on the behaviors, right? The demonstrated ability to meet the job duties. And there are those who are doing them remarkably well. But you can't have a department chair structure when you only have components of the system working well where the rest of the system is not. Because ultimately, that weakens the entire system, the effectiveness, and the outcomes.
I think it is very fixable. Absolutely. It is very
And I
fixable.
think one
I
of
think
the
those people
things-
that don't do their job need to be held accountable for that. I don't agree. It's awful when a chairman doesn't do their job. It's awful for everybody. And I have no disagreement with that. But the system may be in place. We're saying you're not doing your job, step up. But there is no system. Currently, there isn't. So I don't disagree with any of that. Absolutely. The better that it operates, the better the college operates, the better we do, the better the students are. That's no question about it. All right? And we don't disagree with that. All we're saying is getting rid of it, we disagree with that. We think it's fixable. Okay, rather than buying a new car, let's just fix the old one. And I think the old one runs good. I do. I think it can run good with a few adjustments. Actually, quite a few adjustments. Well, I do think so. How do I feel?
I just wanted to mention something that is a theme for, I think, our negotiations in general and on this particular topic, is that we want increased collaboration. Whether it looks like keeping the 6 arts and sciences chairs, getting 2 assists, whatever that is, I think we're losing sight of that's the goal. Because when we collaborate and we can hear from the people who know best in a certain arena, then the students are gonna get what they need. And so if that's not the focus, we're not, the focus is not on the money or the time, is it working? Are we implementing what is in place? If not, who are all the people who are not doing their job? The chairs, the faculty, the administration, everywhere there's a piece where somebody has dropped the ball. There are reasons, there aren't excuses. So then, if we're not collaborating, if we keep, we've got to have it our way, you've got to have it your way, and we don't collaborate, we're not getting anywhere. As Graham had mentioned, and I think Brian did too. And we'll just go back and forth, getting nowhere. So I just want to put forth, that is our goal. Collaboration and improvement, so the college is an improved place. It's not a terrible place. We wouldn't be here, many of us in many, many years. So I just want to put that forth in a positive way to say that is our goal. Not to beat the door until we get our way, kind of thing. And having said that, I'm sure you're ready for questions.
I think a lot of people probably are. So yeah, I think we'll have some discussion about this. We'll talk about some of these proposals, these clean copies, and make sure everyone's good before we TA on them. Obviously, we'll talk about what you just presented, and we'll see if we are able to talk more about department chair now, or if that's going to be a conversation to have over the next couple of weeks or so. Do you want to take half an hour?
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Do I have to keep this room? I feel like there's probably gonna be a lot of bullet.
Where we caught this.
You wanna keep this room, is what you said?
Yeah, the last caucus room we had, it was a little bit tight quarters for what's probably
Yeah,
gonna
We,
be.
we can leave.
You can stay here, we'll go to J 115.
Okay, great, thank you.